And without further ado, introducing our first guest speaker for Own Your Future 2020. He is the author of 20 books, including the bestseller, Choose Yourself. He's the editor at the Altucher Report and hosts the James Altucher Show podcast that has over 40 million downloads. He's started 20 companies, 17 of which have failed. He's achieved the rank of chess master, and he's a strong believer, from what I understand, in the power of a cup of coffee when it comes to getting things done. Let's put our virtual hands together for a silent applause for our man, James Altucher.
Thanks everybody thanks Ben and Blake for inviting me. I'm curious actually, if you type into the Q&A, where are people from? I'm just curious how worldwide this is. And and you can start asking questions. I'll start answering them at some point. But I wanted to comment on a few things. I got very excited about Flippa, completely independent of knowing Ben and Blake. I somehow stumbled on the site, and it was like my dream come true. So I always believe that much more interesting to buy an existing business than to start a business. So I think for VC funded businesses, they always quote like, oh, there's a 90% fail rate. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But if you buy an existing profitable business, your fail rate goes down enormously. Like if I buy a laundromat at a popular corner, my chances of failing or not being profitable is almost non-existent unless people stop doing laundry, which if most people were like me, then I would be in trouble. I don't like to do laundry that much, but again, buying an existing business is so much better in terms of having a successful business model. Now, Blake was talking earlier about you could, buy some of these businesses fairly cheap on Flippa. You can buy them as standalone businesses that you can, have as a side hustle. So you have your full-time gig, and then with only a few hours. I think the initial attraction of Flippa is that I could buy some e-commerce business that sells jewelry or whatever, or some game, and I barely have to pay any attention to it, and I just make money while I sleep. I think that's kind of one possible dream of Flippa. And by the way, I'm not affiliated at all with Flippa, but I am excited about other business models that make use of the Flippa model. So let me just take a look at this Q&A, see where people are from. New Jersey, that's where I'm from. New York, where I'm from. Cleveland, Ohio. Great. So all over the world. Good job, you guys. And that's an interesting thing too. I think people have traditionally viewed the economy and entrepreneurship in a very one-dimensional manner. Either it's up or it's down. So either the economy is going up and hey, we should all start a business, or it's going down and we should all hide under our covers until this period's over. And then there's sort of this two-dimensional way of looking at business, which is that, there's this saying, at any given moment, some industry is in a bull market. And so you don't just look at one industry, which might be up or down, many industries. So, right now, obviously, we're all on Zoom as opposed to having a real conference. Not that this is not real, but it's a virtual way of meeting each other. So Zoom and other video conferencing platforms have done enormously as an industry. In fact, I've seen at least 2 or 3 startups in the past 2 or 3 months that are building new video conferencing platforms, whether for events or meetings or learning or telemedicine or podcasting. This industry is in inning 0 still, the video conferencing industry. And this is just one industry that's in inning 0, which I'll get to in a moment. But that's the fact that there's a three-dimensional way of looking at entrepreneurship, which is that right now, yes, the economy feels horrible. It feels like everything is uncertain and the economy's down. In the US, there was initially 40 million layoffs. Now I don't know what the number of unemployed is, but it's still still pretty horrible. There's like an 11 or 12% unemployment rate. It just feels awful. But that's again, that's back to the one-dimensional way of looking at things. Everyone on this conference is prepared to look at things in a three-dimensional way. You're here because you're looking for opportunity, not because you're trying to get back into the workforce or get your old job back or wait for the furlough to be over or wait for the UBI. You're looking for new opportunities. And I think that's the three-dimensional way, is that trillions of dollars have been dropped onto this economy, not only by the US, but by every major government. And essentially those trillions of dollars, let's say it's like $5 to $10 trillion is right now sloshing around in the world economy, but has not yet found a home. We don't know where it is. It hasn't fully hit the markets. It hasn't fully hit your pocketbook or wallet, but it's here. That money has been basically airdropped onto the world, trillions of dollars. And so the key for all of us is to figure out, where is that money going? Now, it might not be going into restaurants or movie theaters or, cruise lines. The fact that they even considered bailing out cruise lines has to be the most ludicrous thing in the world. There are cruises still on the ocean which have not docked since early March, which is insane. But America wanted to, I think they initially earmarked something like $50 billion to bail out the cruise lines, which always tells me America, no matter what you say about the US is always number one at figuring out how to get people into a buffet line, and hence the interest in cruise lines. But that said, I do think what's exciting to me is buying an existing business, but not necessarily. I think it's interesting to buy one business and have it as a side hustle and try to grow it. Like, let's say you buy an online, jewelry business, or let's say you're looking at what's trending on Kickstarter. And I think about a month or so ago, there was a bread machine product trending on Kickstarter. And that's interesting because during this period, since the economic lockdowns worldwide, what are the main themes that we're seeing? We're seeing, obviously, the theme of remote. We're all from around the world, and yet we're sitting in our homes. So remote is key, and I spoke about that already. We're also seeing safety is an important theme. So, for instance, the mask business, the disinfectant business, right now trending on Kickstarter this moment is a product for hygienic doorknobs. So doorknobs made out of brass, because brass is part tin, part copper, and part copper. Copper is an antiviral. So it's always interesting to see what's trending on Shopify, what's trending on Kickstarter, what's trending on Google Trends. So bread machines were trending for a while because bread is like this comfort food. We want safety. We want comfort. We want to be happier. So during this lockdown, people started cooking, making their own bread. And so let's say you were going to buy, let's say there's some Flippa site out there that makes bread machines, and for makes $20,000 profit a year. You buy it for $50,000, so 2.5 times earnings. And that's an interesting buy. So you'll make an extra $20,000 on the side. You'll be happy. And then maybe you have some ideas to improve it. So the $20,000 can go up to $25,000. Like maybe you'll do affiliate deals with other product companies. Maybe you'll sell your email list. Maybe you'll sell other products. Who knows? There's various ways you can improve a standalone business. And I think that's fine. But I think there are other business models that one should consider in this world. One is, let's go meta for a second on Flippa. So why can you buy a business that has $20,000 a year in profit for just $50,000, 2.5 times earnings? It's as if you're buying something and it's as if you're buying a bond and you're getting a 40% dividend, which is enormous. That's dirt cheap that you could buy businesses on Flippa. It's because those businesses are small. So the smaller a business is, it's usually viewed as a little bit riskier, and you could usually buy it for a cheaper multiple of earnings. So one business model that one should think about is, and this is one that I've been thinking about, is don't just buy one pre-existing business, buy 100. So you buy 100 of these e-commerce sites, and let's say they're all in the e-commerce area, so you can combine them and have some sort of back-end synergies. Like you can combine all the accounting, you can maybe combine what you're paying for storage on AWS, you can maybe get a cheaper deal on drop shipping and storage and physical storage of products. So if you buy 100 of these products, of these sites, there's ways to build a business just by combining back-end synergies. But what ends up happening is when you buy 100 of these businesses, the multiple that you can value the business at goes up. So instead of eventually you'll be able to sell the business not for 2.5 times earnings, but for 20 times earnings. So that's one business model, which is buy 100 of these, improve the profits one by one, but also improve the valuation of the entire business. You buy all of the earnings for 2.5 times earnings and you sell it all for 20 times earnings. So this is the way to start thinking. Look for trending items, focus on, safety, remote, all these other trending models in this environment, and then go meta, buy lots of these earnings flows and sell for a greater multiple of earnings. Similarly, you could be a lender to people who want to buy on Flippa. And, if everybody's making 40% on their earnings, you could start lending people at 20% interest rates. And that's a decent business. You could raise money for that. You could grow. It could be the last two business models I described, lending plus aggregating hundreds of these businesses. These could be 10, 20, $30 million businesses in the long run. And a great example from the OOs was Demand Media, which bought and combined hundreds of small e-commerce businesses and was very successful doing that. It ended up being a multi-billion-dollar company. So, and another thing to consider too is that, you don't have to put up all the money yourself. There's various deals you could do with these sellers. You could raise money like a hedge fund. You could also create an information business about sites like Flippa. So Flippa is my favorite site in the space, but there are other sites where you could buy and sell businesses or other streams of online income. So imagine you can create an online newsletter, charge $100 a month, and analyze different businesses you could buy across these platforms and make suggestions about, show how you do due diligence on each one of these businesses. If you're charging $100 a month and you get 100 people subscribing to your newsletter, that's $10,000 a month. It could be the newsletter business about buying and selling these online e-commerce businesses. That in itself could be another way of going meta to make an enormous amount of money. So I'm going to start answering some questions. Please feel free to ask. So someone.
Yeah, I'll jump in here if you want, and we were collecting some on the side for you to make it a little easier because I know a lot was coming in.
Okay, Ben? Do you want to ask me the questions?
Yeah, I'll jump right through them, and I really appreciate that you talked yourself or all of us into essentially becoming our own bank and bankrolling all of these investors. That's amazing.
And by the way, that diversifies the risk considerably. So you're not just buying one business. And again, the way you're managing risk is the more businesses you buy, the higher valuation you can charge when you combine them all. And the greater your profits could be by combining some of these back office needs that are replicated through each of the businesses. So this is a great way to go meta on Flippa. Or you could do the newsletter. I just almost said newsletter, but you could do a newsletter about Flippa style sites and how to buy and sell these businesses and which businesses right now are attractive and what's trending and what's not. And then you take almost zero risk and that could turn into a huge business. So right now, thinking three-dimensionally how to get a hold of this extra $5 trillion that are being airdropped onto the world economy, this is the way to think of things. So anyway, go for it on asking me questions.
Yeah, we got a good one from Tammy. She says her biggest concern with buying a business is the ability to run it the way that the current owner has run it. I was wondering if you can speak to that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So let's say you buy a business, and the owner the previous owner who sold you the business disappears, and then suddenly all of your customers and vendors disappear. The people selling you product and the people buying product, they all disappear. That's a catastrophe, right? So that's what you're referring to. That's the main nervousness I would have in buying any of these businesses. But that's why you do due diligence. So once there's a deal that occurs, once you guys settle on a price, it's there's always a quote in every deal term sheet. This is all done pending due diligence. So you call up the vendors who are selling you product. You analyze on a big spreadsheet who all the customers were. How did the customers arrive at this site? Did the customers arrive through Google search? Did the customers arrive because they were friends of the previous owner? So you need to do due diligence, and that's critical. But that's the more due diligence you do, that solves the problem. And there are many areas on the web where you could just search due diligence checklist, and you'll see a pretty good checklist for how to do due diligence on businesses like these.
Good stuff. Good stuff. We've got Max, who's curious. He says, given the current skew between potential buyers and sellers, if he's got the numbers right, is it time to sell or time to buy?
Great question. And of course, it depends on the industry. So let's just say, let's just not look at Flippa. Let's look at the world in general. It is the wrong time to buy a restaurant in New York City. So that's like an extreme in one area. It's probably the right time to buy a rising video game app, mobile game app, like or e-commerce. Again, you could Google what products are trending on Shopify. So Shopify has over 1 million individual e-commerce stores. And if you see, oh, this is pretty consistent, this product is trending on Shopify, and then you could look on Flippa for the sites that are selling products similar to those trending products, those are probably good industries to go into, or at least it's a clue. By the way, validating a product is very important. So let's say you want to check the demand for, you're unsure, you're thinking of buying some e-commerce site, and you're unsure about if there's demand or not going into the future. Like maybe this was just this past year, past 2 years, maybe it's not going to be in demand going forward. Here's an idea. Take a picture of one of the products on the site that you're thinking of buying, put up a bunch of Facebook ads. You want to experiment with different Facebook ads, and then see what the click-through rate is on those ads. You just have to put $100 budget per ad, see what the click-through rate is. You don't have to link to anything because Facebook will tell you what the click-through rate is, whether those ads are linking to anything or not. If you have a 2 or 3% click-through rate, then you just validated your product. That's a decent product. And people like the picture, they like your ad, they like the headline. 3% is enormous, and that means your product is good to go. Then you could start bidding on the Flippa site or whatever else. So I forgot the original question, but maybe I answered it.
Should we be buying or selling?
So if you validate the product, you should be a buyer.
It makes sense. I love that. That Facebook trick is genius. We've got
by the way, I use that Facebook trick for everything. If I'm thinking of a title for a book, I'll put up 4 or 5 different titles, and I'll just see which on 4 or 5 different ads, and I'll see which ad is clicked on the most, and that's the title of my book.
Yeah, I love that. It's $100 instead of thousands in product.
Yeah.
Alex from Germany, he is wondering what you think about leverage. He says, what would you personally indebt yourself to start, and if so, to what extent, and any tricks that might come to mind?
Yeah. So the basic answer is absolutely, I would go into debt, because let's just look at the example that I gave before. You're buying a company that has $20,000 in profit per year, and you could buy it for $50,000. So I think the average multiple of earnings on Flippa or other sites like this are about 2.5, between 2 and 4 or 2 and 5 times earnings. So let's say you bought a $20,000 a year earnings site for $50,000. That means you're getting 40%. You could borrow $50,000 with let's say 10% interest, but you know that $50,000 is returning you 40% a year in earnings. So gradually, with with no money down, as they say, you could pay off the loan in just a few years out of your earnings. So that's the basic answer, but there are some tricks. So the first trick is, can you borrow that money from the seller? So the seller is, most businesses, 90% of businesses, when they end, when the owner is tired of them, they simply shut down. They don't sell at all. And so if you're telling the seller, hey, I'm willing to pay the price you want, I'll even pay you a little bit more actually, but let's work out a deal where I pay you a balloon payment. Maybe I'll pay you $10,000 up front for the $50,000, and then I'll pay you, $8,000 a year or $5,000 a year going forward. And the collateral is the business. So you're getting what that's called seller financing, and many sellers will do it, not all, but many. And they might want a bigger, all those things are negotiated. They might want a bigger balloon payment. They might want half down. They might be okay with zero down. They might want a quicker return. But seller financing is very common because it's better than just simply shutting down the business and they have no work. And you kind of have no risk, because if the business fails, because let's say all the vendors or customers go away, the collateral is the business. So the business just returns to the original owner. So that's one way I would think about it, seller financing. If you're using a bank to borrow the money, good luck, that banks don't lend money for this. But if you're using like a hedge fund or some other fund to borrow the money, just be careful about the collateral you use. Don't, the collateral should be the business. Try to avoid a personal guarantee. Try to avoid your house's collateral, things like that. But there's lots of ways I myself would always use debt, because then again, don't forget, the more businesses you buy, the higher the valuation goes up. So if I buy 20 businesses, maybe now I could flip the whole thing for 5 times earnings, 10 times earnings, when I just spent 2.5 times earnings for everything. So then I go through the math and it works out very nicely for you. If you're selling the whole thing for 10 times earnings, you pay back the loan and you have a nice substantial profit when you put minimal to zero money down.
Good answer.
This is like the private equity market that's existed for the past 40 years. This is how private equity works. It's all leveraged buyouts. This is how that entire market works. But this is inning 0 for e-commerce sites, whereas in the traditional private equity market, it's inning 12, where they're in overtime already, and they've lost, by the way. So it's better to do that type of model here, and it's a model that's proven to work.
Exactly. I like this question because I think we get a lot of people with similar thoughts, myself included. Pawan, I'm probably mispronouncing that name, says, what are the top skills that a newbie should have if they were getting into the online business space?
It's a great question. And I would always count myself as a newbie because the industry constantly changes, right? So maybe 10 years ago, your expertise in search engine optimization might have been an important skill. Now it might be your expertise in, finding cheap opportunities for Facebook ads or Instagram ads, or buying opportunities with TikTok influencers, or finding cheap ads on podcasts. So marketing is one type of skill, but that's a skill that constantly changes. So if you always have to be up with what's the latest, what are the ad dollars that have the most impact? And I would have to constantly assess almost every month what's working. So I guess the skill is learning about that, but google.com is a useful little website for helping you figure that out. And there's also online courses about this and so on. Another skill, of course, is due diligence. We spoke about that. You want to make sure the business doesn't fall apart the second you buy it. You want to be able to analyze financials, but you get an accountant to help you with that if you're not skilled at that. That's a commodity skill that you can easily pay $100 for someone to help you if you don't have that skill yourself. Do you need skills in programming? No. Again, that's a commodity skill you can find on Fiverr or freelance or in your neighborhood, whatever. And then, then there's some business skills. Maybe you want to be able to do affiliate deals, or you want to come up with other business models. You're selling bread machines, so you do deals with other people, with somebody selling a website selling bread cookbooks, and you do kind of a swap of ads, and you do affiliate deals with people. And an affiliate deal means if you send customers to them, you put an ad on your site, if you send customers to them, you split 50-50 whatever your customers buy on their site, and vice versa. So there's kind of nuanced business skills, but the main skill, I would say, and this is a skill I learned, unfortunately, the hard way, understanding valuation. So understanding that first thing I talked about, why are some of these businesses only selling for 2.5 times earnings, but with some, business manipulation, a little bit, manipulation is the wrong word, but with some business acumen, you could change that 2.5 times earnings to 10 times earnings, which means you don't have to actually improve the business. You just have to improve the business model and you make considerable money. So understanding the difference between a business model and a business is important.
That's good stuff. I mean, we only have a few minutes left. I want to give you a chance for some self-promotion, of course, and we did have a question in here from Josh. Could you just briefly summarize your book, Choose Yourself? What's that all about?
Yeah, so a lot of times you want to do something and people tell you you can't do it. Like, let's say, we're right now, everybody calls this period in our lives, we're going into a new normal. And for some reason, people think we're going back to something that was like the old normal with just some tweaks to it. I don't believe that at all, actually. We're going right now through a great reset, and everything's going to change. Everything in our lives are going to change. If you have kids, you know what I mean. They didn't go to school this past 6 months. They're probably not going to go to school next year. Life is different. And the similar thing happened with the rise of the internet, and throughout history, similar things have happened. But let's say I want to write a book, and I used to think, and I'm a writer, so I used to think, oh no, I got to get an agent, and then the agent has to find an editor, then the publisher has to like it, the marketing department has to like it, Barnes and Noble has to like it. You have to jump through all these hoops, and you have to get everybody to like you in order to publish a book, in order to do your dream. Well, what if everybody says no to me? And what if I think they're wrong? Well, I can choose me. I can just write my book, and now I can upload it to Amazon and I could publish it. In fact, I've published my first 7 or 8 books were with major publishers. And then I decided, you know what? I'm sick of using regular publishers. It takes a year to get a book published. You don't really make all that much money because they get the most of the money. So I wrote Choose Yourself, actually. And I hired somebody to do the cover. I hired a marketer to help me with the marketing. And I uploaded it to Amazon as a Kindle and as a paperback and as an audiobook. I did my own audiobook, and I've sold over 1 million copies. It's my best-selling book. I've made more money from Choose Yourself than any other book that I've done, mainstream or self-published. And I chose myself to write and publish a book. I'll give you another example. Somebody else came to me and wanted to do a docu-series, 8 episodes about the book Choose Yourself and the lessons in it. So they shot a whole documentary and divided up into 8 episodes. And then they were saying to me, well, do you have any ideas? What should we do with this? And I'm like, well, let's self-publish it. Let's release it as a series on Amazon. And then it'll look like any other television series on Amazon. But then I went one step further. Let's take the first 2 episodes and let's put it in movie theaters. So this weekend, it's going in movie theaters all across the southern U.S. And it's fascinating because many movie theaters are not open. So to make the top 10 list of box office for a weekend, you only need to sell about $500 worth of tickets. Normally, you would need to sell $20 million. You have to be an Avengers movie or a Hunger Games movie and sell $20 million worth of tickets to be in the top 10 in the box office. Last weekend, you just needed to sell $279 worth of movie tickets to be. I always wanted to be a top 10 box office hit. I will definitely guarantee that my movie will be a top 10 hit next weekend because I found one of the only movie theater chains that are open. And once you're a top 10 hit, by the way, you're an Oscar contender. So there's so many different ways. If you think creatively, you could choose yourself. You could make your own fashion line. You don't have to be Ralph Lauren. You can make your own fashion line. I'm wearing pajamas right now because I want to make an outerwear pajama line. So I could order pajamas on Alibaba from a factory. I can make them put my logo on it. And I can say we're living in this great reset, this new normal. I just want to wear comfortable clothes. Here's outerwear. That's the same as pajamas. I could set up a store on Shopify. I could advertise it on Facebook. And boom, I just created my own fashion line. So you could choose yourself for almost anything that you previously. I would have thought it was impossible to release a movie on 20 movie theaters across the country. I would have thought it was impossible to publish my own book. I would have thought it was impossible to set up my own fashion line. But all of these things you can choose yourself to do.
That I'll give you a round of applause on that. Choose yourself, choose pajamas, do what you got to do. I love it.
I'll give one more example.
Okay,
6
quickly.
years ago, I started doing stand-up comedy, and everybody told me, James, you need to wait in line. You can't do this. You need to be a comedian for 20 years before anyone will let you on stage. You know what? In February, right before the lockdown, I toured all over the Netherlands. I've toured now all over the US. I chose myself. I didn't let 100 people told me I couldn't do this, and I did it.
Hey, that's what it takes. The more people say no, it's when you say yes. I love it.
Exactly.
James, thank you so much. My God, next time we're going to need about 4 hours with you because we have a lot of questions. I know you are, a busy guy, but maybe we'll send some of these to you, and over the coming months, if you can answer some for these people, it'd be amazing.
Yeah, if you send me all these questions, I promise one way or the other, I will answer them and send them back to you.
Fantastic. We'll collect them and do that. So thank you so much for being here today, for teaching us to choose ourselves. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers, man.